What the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now podcast.
With Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Welcome to another edition of The Week That Was here on the iHeartRadio Network. I'm Aaron Rand along with Natasha Hall. And this week, we'll take a look at these stories. So imagine you're competing for your country in one of the most important international races in your life. And you find yourself miles ahead of your next nearest competitor. But then tragedy strikes and you fall. Dream shattered? Not for our next guest. You'll meet Jean-Simon Desgagnés coming up.
So when you just end up scrolling and you kind of turn into a screen zombie? That can't be good for us. So what effect do you think it might be having on our children's brains? Well, new research is being done on how using social media is actually changing kids' behavior, and not in a good way. We spoke to two experts about those behavioral changes and what can be done about it. Also, it's still something no one seems to want to talk about. Menopause. And not talking about it is part of why it's costing the Canadian economy over $3 billion a year. So let's talk about it and see what can be done to make things better for women trying to manage symptoms.
But we start with this. A new Washington Post report provides the deepest dive yet, trying to understand how the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th even happened. We spoke to the Washington Post reporter who co-authored that story. How could it have happened? How is it possible for Hamas to so easily penetrate one of the most surveilled and secure borders in the entire world? Joby Warrick is a national security reporter with the Washington Post and one of the authors of this article. Joby, thanks so much for being with us.
No, pleasure.
Let me begin with that question because it's the one that everyone was asking at the beginning. How could this have happened? What did you undercover? What did you discover in this article?
Well, a lot of attention up to now has been on Israeli intelligence failures, and there certainly were quite a few of those, and they've been covered, ad infinitum. What we looked at instead was how Hamas, this organization that lives kind of in a cage. I mean, they're living in an area where there's really very difficult to get in and out, very hard to get supplies. How do they pull off something so sophisticated? And one of the things we found was that they very carefully set this up over the course of years, at least 2 years, as far as we can tell, doing things to lull the Israelis into a sense of false security, refraining from involvement in military attacks. Their ally in Gaza, this group called Palestinian Islamic Jihad, would frequently send rockets into Israel, as both groups used to do. But Hamas was kind of pulling back from that. They were making signals that they wanted to work on economic development. They were governing the place, for goodness sake, so let's try to improve the economy. And the Israelis were ready to buy that. And there were even we learned some suggestions that Hamas was ratting out some of its more rambunctious neighbors within Gaza, telling the Israeli security forces about it. All of it, telling the Israelis or giving the signal that they were on a different track, and they were not interested in war anymore, when in fact they were planning something of historic proportions in terms of its scale and intensity. One
of the other things you discovered in having read the article, I found this fascinating. One of the theories at the beginning was that, of course, in this particular case, Hamas is, Iran backed, but you're suggesting in this from your report that this was something they had done, Hamas, on their own without necessarily even informing or letting their allies know. Is that correct?
Yeah, it seems a bit crazy, but all these groups have their own agenda. One thing they have in common, speaking of groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, and then, of course, some of the other militia groups in Syria and Iraq, they get heavy backing from Iran, but the Iranians are often content to kind of let 1,000 flowers bloom in a way and just let these groups kind of work out their own local plans and agendas. And in this case, there was a lot of coordination, it seems, within in the last couple of months and years, with groups thinking about some future operation against Israel. But Hamas, in this case, appears to have just gone off on its own, sort of jumped the gun a little bit, partly because they thought the others would join in, figuring that the West Bank would become inflamed and there'd be fighting there, that Hezbollah would be compelled to come in. Did not expect that they'd be left alone, which is what happened essentially, at least up to this point, in this particular case.
Yeah, and there's also a reference, if I understood it, to a prisoner of war, a Hamas member who had been in Israeli custody and basically was listening all the time, embedding himself kind of in a way in what was actually being planned or what the Israelis were doing.
Yeah, here's a guy who had a front row seat to Israeli society for a couple of decades because he was in an Israeli prison. He was released a couple of years ago in a prisoner swap, but he became sort of an expert on Israeli media and culture. He's very, very fluent in the language, and he understood the Israeli psyche. And he understood that one thing for sure is that they wanted to forget about Hamas. They wanted to concentrate on more serious threats, Hezbollah to the north, the West Bank to the east, and let Hamas just kind of do its own little thing. And he was able to essentially help persuade them that this was Hamas was not something for them to worry about. And the Israelis really let their guard down. They had intelligence gathering stations and in place, but they really weren't paying close attention. And Hamas was able to speak through code and use communication channels or word of mouth and passing notes in tunnels and other ways that the Israelis couldn't understand or see, and that really set them up for being fooled in a very big way.
I was struck, Joby, by the fact that, you discovered that while this may have been years in planning, as you touched on there, it was unbelievably horrific and simplistic in its intention. The orders were kill as many people and take as many hostages as possible. Tell us about that discovery.
Yeah, and that's a quote from one of the notes that one of the fighters or terrorists was carrying when they went over the top on October 7. It was. We kept looking and thinking we'd find more sophisticated weapons or things that the Iranians had given them, but it was 9/11-like in the sense that it was very simple technology in the sense that didn't take great weapons or any new technology to do this. They just planned very carefully. They had their forces lined up. They had very good operational security so the word didn't leak out. And then they came over with assault rifles and RPGs and things like thermobaric RPG rounds, which means that you've got something that instantly turns a building into an inferno with 2,000-degree temperature, meant to essentially destroy all human life or all life within a structure. So those are things they came over with, and they had sort of the ambition of getting hostages. But, as you guys alluded to in the opening here, it wasn't just about hostages. They could have gone out and just grabbed a few soldiers and come back in. But no, they were looking to restart the entire Palestinian fight, which they felt had just gone very badly. There was the possibility that Israel was going to reach some kind of accommodation with the Saudis, and then everybody would forget about the Palestinians. Hamas wanted to change the subject and do it in a dramatic way, and that's exactly what they set out to do a month ago. As
to the timing, and this is interesting as well, some people say, well, this has to do with what's been going on internally in Israeli politics. Perhaps that played into it. Did it?
It did to the extent that the Hamas thought their moment was right. They've been watching, as all of us have, the domestic unrest in Israel in the last few months, and some of the reservists, saying they weren't going to work, they were going to stay home in protest of the Netanyahu government's policies. So they saw that, but they also saw what they thought was a softening of the Israeli mentality, that Israel was less likely to really risk a ground incursion, that they're probably going to respond, strongly, but they didn't see the kind of block by block fighting that the Israelis are doing now. They didn't really think the Israelis had it in them. So they were reading lots of things, and some of them accurately, and some of them they just frankly got wrong and overreached.
Yeah, and they thought they were prepared to carry, I think you said this right off the top, to carry this on for much, much longer had it not been shut down originally. Yeah,
so we've got something like 30 groups heading off in different directions, and some, each group had its own specific instructions. Take this kibbutzim or this military base, take hostages, kill as many as you can. But others were to the south and to the east were going further. And we have this couple of groups that went as far as about 15 miles to the east of Gaza, which is about halfway, half the distance to West Bank. And they had enough food, enough ammunition, enough supplies to last them for several days. And the maps they carried make intelligence officials believe that they were planning to go all the way to the West Bank, which symbolically for them, linking Gaza, this one Palestinian enclave, with the other bigger one and the West Bank, would have been symbolic. And we think they also believe that they could really bring the West Bank Palestinians into the fight. If they got that far, if they got to the border, then their brethren in Ramallah and other places would be compelled to join them.
I just have one last question, and I don't necessarily know there is an answer to this. There are 200 plus hostages still being held. Were you able to determine what the ultimate plan here, what's the objective here with these people?
Well, in the last 2 or 3 days, there's been all kinds of talk about hostage releases and some kind of deal for, a temporary ceasefire or something that would allow some of them to go home. it all seems, very nebulous to us right now. The one thing that's more remarkable really is the fact that you don't see or hear much from the hostages. Hamas has been content to let that sort of die into the background while the focus is on the Israeli attack and the atrocities at hospitals and all the things that we're paying attention to now. But they're not putting hostages up or doing as they threatened beginning, killing them, which they talked about doing in the very first days. But they've essentially made them go away. So we're not thinking about them or sort of seeing their faces or hearing them on video, except very rarely. And that seems strategic as well. They've got a big card to play, but they're very, very conscious of public opinion on this, and so they're trying right now to sort of tread cautiously and to make sure that they keep at least a big chunk of the world opinion on their side.
Joby Warrick over at the Washington Post. Really, for those who want to know, it's quite the article, and it outlines so many different things. Joby, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Really enjoyed talking with you. Best of luck now.
All right, there you go. Want to check it out if you want to know more. It's in the Washington Post. It came up beginning of this week.
Informative.
Interactive.
And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
So, when you just end up scrolling and you kind of turn into a screen zombie, that can't be good for us. So what effect do you think it might be having on our children's brains? Well, new research is being done on how using social media is actually changing kids' behavior, and not in a good way. We spoke to two experts about those behavioral changes and what can be done about it.
Listen, I think we can all agree that we spend too much time on screens, and I think we all know it's not good for us. So imagine the impact it could be having on our kids. New research is being done right here in Montreal about how using social media is actually changing kids' behavior. We're going to find out more, and we're also going to find out what could be done about it. First, let's talk to Patricia Conrod, a researcher at Sainte-Justine. She's a professor of psychiatry and addiction, also at the Université de Montréal. Thank you so much for your time. It's good to talk to you again, Patricia. So tell us a little bit more about this research and whether or not, I think we could assume out of the gate that it is having an impact on children's brains and their behavior. How worried do we need to be, and what does this research show?
So the research shows that, the research published recently is new findings suggesting that high levels of screen time are increasing young people's symptoms of attentional difficulties and hyperactivity. And social media is perhaps contributing more than other forms of screen time. And the way it's doing this is by impacting on cognitive functioning. So we used a robust neuropsychological measure of cognitive control and impulsivity, and it could explain how social media is increasing ADHD symptoms. So, the findings are difficult to ignore. They're concerning to me, and I think also match a lot of what people are just describing from their own experiences, is that it really does distract you from tasks, from getting things done, and it also just makes for shorter attention spans in a variety of areas of life because you have spent so much time exposing yourself to content that is brief, that involves passive viewing, that doesn't have extended narratives to them, and doesn't require much cognitive control.
Is it kind of, just to boil it down a bit in layman's terms, although you made it quite clear there, Patricia, but I'm just kind of imagining it, you're scrolling mindlessly and your brain is stimulated, but not engaged per se.
Yeah, that's my take on it. So it's kind of counter training in the sense that, in order to develop cognitive control, and it's a function that does develop quite significantly over the course of adolescence. In order to develop that, you need to practice that skill. And that's why children go to school, and that's why they're given homework, and that's why they're encouraged to do exercises and so on. It's to train that part of the brain. And if they're spending very large amounts of time doing an activity that actually interferes with that function and doesn't require it, and in fact maybe might even be promoting a different type of cognitive style, that's of concern.
So I'm thinking, and we're going to get some advice from Katherine Johnson-Martinko in just a moment. But in terms of it, as parents, our roles in this obviously is to limit screen time. But should we also just be trying to get our kids engaged in if they're going to have screen time, that it's stuff that has a better effect on their brain? And what would that be?
Exactly. So, try to nudge your children towards, if they're on YouTube, is nudge them towards longer videos that have some kind of educational component to it, or the possibility of having a more interactive experience with your digital device. So I've got my daughter into crossword puzzles and a couple of the New York Times, the quick games that you can play.
Wordle. My 11-year-old likes to play Wordle with me. Okay.
So that kind of activity versus one where you're simply kind of passively viewing very brief content and scrolling through it without much thought, cognitive manipulation of the information. And then the other thing is that, our other research is suggesting that some of the content that they are being exposed to through social media might actually be promoting with some problematic attitudes and norms, such as the content that's shared by peers is more likely to promote unrealistic biased and unrealistic norms about what you should look like, how you should spend your time. More young people who spend a lot of time on social media are more likely to think that it's normal to be a drinker as an adolescent, and that influences their drinking behavior and puts them at risk of being a heavier drinker, an earlier onset drinker.
Well, I'm glad that this important research is being done. Thank you so much, Patricia. I just want to make sure I have time here to also speak with Katherine Johnson-Martinko, who is the author of Childhood Unplugged. So, Katherine, we're taking all this information in and trying to kind of figure out what to do with it. But one of the major reasons I wanted to talk to you is because you've actually succeeded in what so few parents have succeeded in doing, which is not letting your teenage kid have a phone. So you have a 14-year-old child and they do not have a smartphone. How the heck did you manage this?
Well, thanks for having me. That's a good question. There's some days I wonder how I manage it myself. But I do have 3 children aged 8, 12, and 14, and none of them have a phone, and none of them have tablets either. So we've lived a pretty screen-free life.
That's amazing.
So it's a point of ongoing contention with him, of course, because a lot of his peers do have phones, but he's also starting to see a lot of what Patricia just described, the negative effects of these devices and what they're doing to these kids, and how they're really getting in the way of a lot of real-life experiences that his peers are missing out on, conversations and, physical activity and different sorts of adventures that my kids are lucky enough to engage in because they're just not distracted by these devices all the time.
Can I ask a question in terms of actually getting your child to go ahead with this? How hard was that to actually, when you had that discussion, was that a losing proposition at the outset?
Well, good question. But I guess I don't see it as being a situation where I needed his permission to not give him this device.
Ooh.
I love that.
I see myself as the parent
You're
who
the adult.
has the responsibility to do what I believe to be best based on the research that I've done. So I do encourage parents at the talks that I give and tell them that you do have the right to revisit the rules surrounding screen time and social media and all of this with your kids. Even if they're into it already, you can pull back. It's not a right that they have, it is a privilege.
Okay, so we're going to run out of time, unfortunately, because this is such a bigger conversation that we could be having. But I was thinking about the abstinence approach, right? When you tell kids, don't do that, don't drink, don't have sex, and then it makes it like the forbidden fruit. Any concern on that front, Katherine, that it's going to create down the road bigger problems, perhaps in terms of that they haven't had access to it at all?
I'm not concerned about that because we know that smartphones are akin to a lot of other very addictive substances. And we don't hesitate as parents to limit exposure to things like alcohol or drugs or, getting a driver's license until you've achieved a certain level of maturity. And I think that with smartphones, it's looking increasingly smart on the part of parents to sort of delay ownership so that by the time the kid actually has the device, they've established a lot of the healthy lifestyle habits that are conducive to them using it in a mature way.
I think you offer such great advice, and you're kind of my hero that you've managed to succeed in doing this. I'm taking notes. Thank you, Katherine.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
That is Katherine Johnson Martinko. The book is called Childhood Unplugged, Practical Advice to Get Kids Off Screens and Find Balance. Before that, we spoke with Patricia Conrod, researcher at the Sainte-Justine.
So you've been taking notes that entire time. Good luck trying to sell this to your daughter, by the way.
I'm pretty strict.
Yeah?
But it's a fight all the time, and it's an exhausting fight.
I love her answer, though. I'm the adult, right? There's no discussion here. I'm going to tell you how this is going to play. So good luck with that
It
as well.
also causes problems in the couple because Dave's more lenient than I am. So there's that.
Okay.
Informative,
Interactive,
and always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
So imagine you're competing for your country in one of the most important international races in your life, and you find yourself miles ahead of your next nearest competitor. But then tragedy strikes and you fall. Dream shattered? Not for our next guest. You'll meet Jean-Simon Desgagnés coming up. It has been a pretty good run for Canadian athletes around the world. I don't know if you saw the story yesterday. Our Canadian tennis, our women capturing a championship. Something that's been completely unexpected.
King, first time the Canadians ever won. And we have two Montrealers on that team, Leila Fernandez and Eugénie Bouchard.
And then we have a Montrealer who's going to join us. I don't know if she's actually is from Montreal, but he's a Quebec athlete participating. And by the way, not a lot of talk about the Pan Am Games, right?
Yeah, and this is such a fantastic story to come out of these games.
So there are athletes, of course, from all the Pan American countries. Canada does usually very well at these, and I think perhaps even better now than they did years ago. So Jean-Simon Desgagnés is a Quebec athlete who was in the strangest event, as I said, which I believe is the steeplechase. He's on the line right now. Jean-Simon, thanks so much for being here.
Hello, how are you?
Pretty good. What part of Quebec are you from?
From Quebec City.
From Quebec City. And how, first of all, because I think, as I said to Natasha moments ago, this is the weirdest event, the steeplechase, I think, in anything participated in the Olympics, except for maybe the hammer throw. How did you get involved in steeplechase?
I mainly get involved in it because at first it is 3,000 meters, so it is a distance I'm good at. It is the distance I'm good at running, so first off, there's no 3,000 meter without hurdle, so that's why I first of all went into this, and then the aspect of having hurdles, having like a water jump, having all those little like obstacles on the course. I feel it's a nice way to break like the monotony of running. So it's a part of it of like track and field, usually just running in circle, but this is like something more funny about it.
Well, and that water obstacle, good God, I was like, talk about adding insult to injury, but you still prevailed. So tell us about this particular race in the Pan Am Games last week in Santiago.
Can you repeat, please? So
you're doing the race last week in Santiago. It's going well, and then what went wrong, Jean-Simon?
Actually, I don't really know what went wrong. I mean, steeplechase is mainly a thing I do in the summer, so mainly July and August. So doing it in the end of October, early November, it's not what I usually do. So I wasn't really trained and ready for that, but still I managed to do pretty well. So I feel it was just a little technical difficulty. I just slipped on the last water pit. I was going fast. I was trying to go faster, and then on the last water pit with the tiredness coming in, the speed coming in, I just like slipped on it. But I was as surprised as everyone else when this happened.
So if I watched it, we've both seen the video. It looks like you clipped your foot on the hurdle just before you landed in the water, and then of course you fell down. But the thing that I noticed that's pretty amazing here, usually in a close race, that's enough to cost you either first or second place or maybe even a medal. You were so far ahead in this race. When you finally got up and got the water off and kept running, there was still nobody even close to you.
Yeah. I mean, I started pushing at around 500-600 from the end, so I knew that was the plan since the beginning. So I was like, okay, let's go all out for the last 600. And then when the last water pit came in, I had enough like distance from the second one that I had the luxury to fall and get back up, but I still managed to finish the last lap in 62 seconds with a fall, which is actually pretty fast for a steeplechase race.
It's amazing. It's like it's like the fall didn't even happen. Like, it's quite a spectacular thing, but the way you got up so quickly and kept on going in that moment, Jean-Simon, like, what's going through your head?
I mean, I just fell down and I don't even think about it, and I was backed up. You know, I was like, okay, just get back on your feet and run. I didn't think about, is someone going to pass me? What's going to happen? Am I hurt? What am I doing? I just fell down and instantly I got back up and kept running. I mean, I didn't even have time to think. It was just like a reflex, the adrenaline. I was like, okay, let's get back up and finish this.
Well, congratulations. Yeah. And you have the most, your smile is just, it like rays of sunshine, honestly. It's such a beautiful smile. And Jean-Simon, you said something along the lines of, it's not how you fall, it's how you get back up. Is that your new motto now?
I mean, it's been my motto for a long time. I think that's what makes great athlete. You know, we have good success and that's what we hope for, but there's also a difficult time. It's not always as we want. So the most important thing is that when you succeed, you take it and you make the most out of it. But when it's tough, when you fall, you have to work hard and get back up. And I feel that's how you become better and you become one of the greats. You
did it. You're headed to the Olympics now.
I mean, I hope so. Now I'm 12th on the world ranking list, and the quota is up to 32. So mathematically, I'm qualified for the Olympic, but the official team will be announced maybe a month or 3 weeks for the Olympics.
Right. Well, listen, first of all, congratulations on winning the gold at Pan Am. So that's wonderful news. And yeah, I'm sure we'll see you at the Olympics. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Wish you all the best. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Congrats.
You bet. Jean-Simon Desgagnés winning the Olympic gold in the 3,000-meter steeplechase. I had a bad idea that I decided not to share with him, which was, how cool would it be for that event, which already has a water hazard in it, to make it deep enough that if you fell, you had to swim through the water hazard before you could continue running. But I thought I'll keep that to myself.
Tough enough.
Keep that to myself.
Informative.
Interactive.
And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
It's still something no one seems to want to talk about. Menopause. And not talking about it is part of why it's costing the Canadian economy over $3 billion a year. So let's talk about it and see what can be done to make things better for women trying to manage symptoms.
What do we know about menopause? I mean, hot flashes, yes, memory lapses, sleep loss, weight gain. Those are a few things, right? But did you know it also costs the Canadian economy up to $3.3 billion a year? That's pretty wild. This, according to a report released last month, and it boils down to symptoms being mismanaged. The report comes from the Menopause Foundation of Canada. Janet Coe is president and co-founder, and she joins us now. Thanks so much for your time today, Janet.
Thanks for having me.
So I feel like we're just beginning to really understand menopause and its impact, and not just on the women experiencing it. So let's talk a little bit about the findings of your study. How is it possible that menopause can cost the economy so much?
Well, we've got 10 million women in Canada over the age of 40. We represent 1/4 of the population. When you just look at working women, it's 5 million working women over the age of 40. And if you just want to look at the period into which most women enter menopause between 45 and 55, it's 2 million working women. So that's a significant percentage of the workforce. And really that 3.5 billion is made up out of 540,000 days of lost work, which results in $237 million annually of lost productivity. Wow. And the one thing that was really interesting in our report was the realization that in their peak earning years, women in the prime of their lives and their working lives are leaving $3.3 billion of revenue annually, losing that because of taking time off work, fewer hours, going part-time, or leaving altogether.
And so when we say that all of this boils down to this $3.3 billion costing the Canadian economy that much, that it boils down to symptoms being mismanaged, that's what's resulting in those days taken off. Is that, like, what are we talking about with regards to symptoms being mismanaged, Janet?
Yes, the reality is that menopause is such a mystery. to many women. There's such a taboo and a stigma. So 1 in 2 women are really unprepared for this time of life. We don't understand the hormonal changes that are happening to our body, and that there are 30 plus symptoms that you might experience. There's so many myths with menopause, and one of them is that it happens to you at some point when you're older, but you're in perimenopause for 2 to 10 years. And if you just do the math, if you enter menopause between 45 and 55, we have women in their 30s and in their early 40s who are in their perimenopause period, and they're confused. They may have all kinds of things happening to them, and they can't connect the dots. And when they can't connect the dots on their health, they don't get help, and that means they're taking, days off work. Sometimes they're going part-time, and sometimes they're leaving the workforce.
Is this a failure? Is this a workplace failure? Is this a health system failure? I feel like doctors don't even get educated on this.
You're so right. Sadly, menopause receives almost no attention in the curriculum that doctors receive. So we've got a healthcare community, through no fault of their own, that doesn't understand or have the expertise to support women. That is changing. But our report from last year, called The Silence and the Stigma of Menopause in Canada, really showed that 72% of women, when they go to their healthcare providers, are not satisfied with the help that they're getting, and many women feel that their symptoms are dismissed or left untreated. So it's a societal issue, and there's a role for the healthcare community to play. And we think from a workplace perspective, it's just a super exciting opportunity to close the knowledge gap at work, break the taboo, and actually support women in their prime. So part of this is changing the conversation on aging, and we have to stop seeing menopause as a negative stage of life. It's actually quite an empowering and positive phase of life.
So then I understand that there's something called the Menopause Works Here campaign. Is this is for employers primarily, or is this to help women advocate for themselves?
Yes, there is this wonderful campaign we've launched called Menopause Works Here. It's to help employers listen, learn, and act about menopause. We created a menopause inclusive playbook that was sponsored by Sun Life, and Sun Life is the first organization to join the campaign, which I think speaks to just the importance of menopause as a subject. And the playbook was really intended to give employers a simple action plan that they can download it for free, they can take a look. It's not a heavy lift to make a big difference in the lives of women in their prime. They're really looking for greater respect in the workplace, for flexibility, for culture change, and for reasonable accommodations.
I completely understand this is what you do at the Menopause Foundation of Canada, but on the whole, Janet, do you feel like things are getting better? Is the volition there to improve the situation?
Oh, I think it's getting better because of women. So I think Gen X will be the last generation of women to be in the dark about menopause, and I think Gen X and the millennials behind us, we're demanding a different level of care. We're not going to put up with suffering through symptoms that could last for a decade or more. And we're also demanding more respect and accountability in the healthcare system and beyond, and advocating for our health, which is so important.
As a Gen Xer, I'm right there with you. And thank goodness things are changing. Janet, great to talk to you. It's an important conversation.
Thank you so much for having the chat.
That wraps up another edition of The Week That Was here on the iHeartRadio Network. I'm Aaron Rand, along with Natasha Hall, and we'll see you next week.
Have a great week.
This has been the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Listen live on your radio weekday afternoons from 2 to 6
on CJAD 800
or through the iHeartRadio app.